We have some CFOs from a cross-section of industries, and we're going to talk about how to balance the CFO role and technology. So I want to just kick it off by asking how you incorporate new technologies into your business, and what are some effective technologies that you've incorporated recently that you can share. Rick, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Thank you, and good evening. First, just context about Mailchimp. Mailchimp is an Atlanta-based company. We are a leading marketing platform for SMBs around the world. We probably have tens of millions of users. It is a global company. We'll send 1 billion emails a day. So I guess you'd call us a digital native. So we are a tech company, and so we see all species of technologies, and we have very sophisticated people that deal with that. When it trickles down to finance, I would say that in general our finance team is relatively tech savvy, and the biggest impact that I would want to communicate to folks is that we're seeing is the need for data science. So our finance team, it's not even the technology, which is what you asked, but the real issue for us is how to deal with it, and how we have massive amounts of data. We have tools that we can use, but we need sophistication on our team to be able to deal with that. And so we have now data science people on our team. If we attack a complex problem, say with pricing, we don't attack it with CPAs or even Wharton MBAs that are quantitative. It's math people. It's generally data science, but I mean these people are trained in statistics. They have PhDs in math and computer science, and now we're morphing into that almost. And I'll just give you an example. We have I was counseling one of my staff and an analyst, and asking her about her professional development, what she was going to train. And I used to hear things like, well, I want to go to a conference and learn about revenue recognition or something like that. But now the response I got, pretty typical, GAAP accounting. But now the response is, I think I'm going to take a 12-week boot camp in data science at Georgia Tech. And so as we're seeing that in our company, I have to believe it's going to permeate to other companies in the future.
So that data wrangling ability is becoming more important at all levels of the company, basically.
Absolutely. The ability to query databases, do the statistics, make sense of it all with visualization. I'm not saying that we are data scientists, but we're getting better at it, and we do a lot of it, in the finance department today.
Sure. Dhiraj, what would you say to what new technologies you've incorporated recently?
So I think for Panasonic Automotive, and again, a little context is important. We're the largest tier one, automotive technologies companies globally. So everything you see in your car, your IVI, some part of the sensing, your V2X, which is vehicle to infrastructure, technologies. We incorporate that, we build on that, and we develop a lot of the new tech as well. So for us, we live technology, and accounting and finance, for the most part, we're just part of that wave, and we're trying to, incorporate more of the requirements. So a big part of our manufacturing and our development is Internet of Things, big data, right? The artificial intelligence usually goes into the equipment and into software. Really can't tie that too much into the finance. Just like, Rick, as you mentioned, data science is important. We're getting there. We're not all there yet. And our team's, improving, because just catching up with technology as it, takes on the world, the markets demand it. We have to keep up with, as you said, accounting is important. Revenue recognition is important, because we need to know how much money we're making at the end of the day, and just not develop things. But ensuring our people are more tech savvy, really to understand what are they being told by our operations, by our developers and our engineers, and how much of that do we filter down and say, well, that makes sense, that's what goes on the books, right? Or to be able to argue the fact that, well, maybe I can't take revenue on that, or maybe you need to think about how much cash flow you're going to put around it. But you can't talk engineering until you know what their technology is. So getting them more engaged with the operations, that's been a big part of what we've been doing.
And so again, we're seeing this technology permeating different levels of the business.
Yes.
And Pietro, is that true on the manufacturing end as well at SCM?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me here. I represent SCM Group SPA and SCM Group USA. So we are one of the largest, if not the largest company in the world when it comes to manufacturing and distributing equipment for the woodworking industries. So I moved here in the United States about 20 years ago because I wanted to be a bit more familiar with the market and help my organization in Italy, which is made of 7 factories, and manufacture equipment that started off right after the Second World in 1945, 1950, and today gain the most prominent position when it comes to worldwide in market share. And we sell technology. Now, these days, the market is divided between like the lower end type of industry, where we try to push and introduce the CNC type of technology, while on the upper end of the market, now robotics, Internet of Things application plays a major role these days. So eventually here in the United States, I see these changes in generation, with this application, machine, and so forth. So we try eventually to serve our customer at best. We put the customer at the center of the project, eventually, and the data science, incorporating data, eventually to improve the quality of the service to the customer. How the technology plays this day the role? Well, we need to be prepared, we need to be ready to upgrade to the next level of the technology. So that's the main goal with the company. So that's it. That's eventually what we do here and what we try to gain in the marketplace.
And when you mention the Internet of Things, is that a technology that you think has fully developed to be useful to you already?
Well, as a matter of fact, that we have in-house software team, software and application and robotics. The Internet of Things help this day to troubleshooting, remotely and try to reduce and be promptness with the response to the customer within the 24 hours. That's our major goal. That would help also my department, finance, to gain eventually the opportunity to respond to the customer and to generate our stream of income, because these days we know that selling product doesn't generate much of the profit, while instead the real cash cow of the company is selling services and create opportunity out there. So that's it. That's eventually what we're doing with the company as right now.
I want to flip it around now because I think that we can all relate to technologies that are overhyped in our own industries. So I want to ask our panelists, are there technologies that for your industry you consider to be overheated, or they're being talked about but they're just not there yet? What are the overhyped technologies in your own industries? Maybe we can start with Dhiraj for this one.
Sure. For our industry, a lot of it, people talk about blockchain, and the first thing that comes to mind is how it can link, tag, and do what it, you can pretty much audit your activities. But blockchain is good for a financial company, financial services company, because they have the volume, they have a fair set of standards and a high level of audit requirements. For a technology / industrial company, that may not work because we're not necessarily auditing every component that goes onto a line, right? Unless it's a safety product. And then you got to get value, because the volumes are very different because the checks and balances happen on the line and afterwards when you have completed and go through the quality testing. So I'd say that is one technology that I have not seen or wanted to adopt outright, even though it's a great technology. It's just not for my industry or for my company.
Right. So while we've seen blockchain's applications in various financial applications, it's not necessarily going to be a fit for every industry while it's being touted in a lot of different places. Pietro, how about you?
Well, I come from a very traditional industry, so in this case, blockchain doesn't play a major role in our industry. I'm sure that is a great application, as we said right here, but right now we are still, nowhere when it comes to this sort of application. So it doesn't really apply in my manufacturing industry as much as it would apply in other industry, I would say.
And stay tuned because we will be discussing blockchain for financial applications after
I
this.
saw a few of you smirking. Yeah,
And Rick, how about you?
Sure. I guess you can't have this discussion without mentioning AI and machine learning.
Sure.
So I'll take that one. So it's interesting. I have a different spin on this. For many people, it's a hyped topic, but for us, it's real. So machine learning is something we've been doing. Again, we have this fully self-serve automated platform. So a lot of automation is inherent in the core to what we do. We've been doing machine learning for quite a while. We just have never called it that. Smart algorithms that teach themselves things so they get better is a big part of what we do. I think I don't actually think that's hype. That's real. That is today. The hype aspect of it is what we see is everybody we work with is trying to call themselves an AI company now.
How do you distinguish between the people who are doing real AI and those who are saying that they're applying it?
Yeah, and I'm not the most technical, but my way of understanding it is machine learning is sort of a core, very purpose-driven, task-driven, data models that get more intelligent by virtue of processing a lot of transactions. They get smarter over time. AI is a much bigger, longer-term thing. It's almost like human intelligence. So we're not certainly doing much of that. Maybe only Google is and some of the other bigger companies. So it's hard to believe that there's a ton of AI happening out there, but machine learning is a very real thing for us. And just as an example, I went to a venture conference here in town, and almost every startup or relatively early stage company has now changed their domain name to say their name .ai. and so that's where I see the hype of it is
Right.
Everybody seems to be under pressure to say that they're in the AI game, and there's very few companies that really are.
But for those companies, they can always just buy the domain to make it look that way.
I guess, yeah.
So for each of you, what do you do to get up to speed quickly on a new technology? Because it seems like there are so many different types of technologies that come through now that you might have to quickly educate yourself in. So in your own experience, what do you do to quickly kind of get up to speed and learn about a new technology? Pietro, why don't you just start us off on that one?
That's a very important question. So what do we do? As a CFO, obviously, you need always to mediate your role as a financial guy and a technology guy, I say. That's eventually our role. Moving from the traditional role of being a financial guy more to a role of also technology type of person. So within the industry and within our department, obviously we have a vision and we look always the opportunity to acquire, incorporate new technology in my department, in my industry in particular. So eventually, you need always to mediate the opportunity also to put this as operating expenses more than a capital expenses, just to see the benefit of it. So my goal eventually is always to look forward and see opportunity to bring into the industry and go from there.
Sure. Rick, how about you?
I think part of our culture at Mailchimp is to encourage creativity and experimentation. And so, we more naturally, I think, are early adopters of things, but to a degree. We experiment quite a bit, and particularly in the finance team, we just happen to have, our entire team's pretty tech savvy, as I said. They tend to be very on top of the latest technologies, and they are great tinkerers and experimenters, and we do encourage that. We have a concept at the company called a parts bin, where we encourage people to build things, even our serious tech, sides of the house, and we may not need it today, but we could use it tomorrow. So that's a big part of our culture, and particularly in finance, we have a good team that experiments with technology that impacts us. An example of that is years ago we implemented a new GL, and we couldn't get the purchase order function to work, and it was going to take 6 months to fix a workflow or get it customized, and we just resigned ourselves to the fact that we're going to have to walk purchase orders around kind of old school. And within a couple days, I got called in an office, and my team had built something using a form technology and another technology that converted things to, that could log things, and then almost like a DocuSign thing. So we were able to go to a link, people could automatically approve things, and it basically worked.
Wow.
And they did this themselves, which is pretty amazing. So it's the kind of thing that we encourage. It is part of the culture.
And what kinds of resources do you give employees to make sure that they feel that they're able to build and experiment in that way?
I think the biggest resource is a little bit of time.
Sure.
When I found I'm doing that, of course, I asked myself, you obviously don't have enough to do. How'd you do this? But, again, the whole company is very technical, so they're willing to work together. So we have no shortage of talent and resources, and the ability of the teams to work together. So some folks on our engineering staff, they helped them a little bit with this, and they were willing to do that. So it's more the cooperating, collaboration that's part of the environment that is the key resource, I think.
Right. And Dhiraj, what do you do when you're trying to get up to speed quickly on a new technology or educate yourself?
Finance is never the early adopters.
Right,
Of
that's
technology.
true.
We stand back and watch, but what really helps our company is, we're very, upfront. We're out there, pioneers in the technology side of things. So we bring in a lot of people who are young, who have ideas, who are trying to be on the cutting edge of, developing things. Of course, a lot of it is experimentation, right? We get people from Georgia Tech and other, really high-level tech universities. And when my team works with them, they want to be, talking the same language, when they interact with them. It's not just, hey, I'm in finance, knock on the door, I may let you in, but, there's a lot of interaction there as well. But given that, one of the areas for us is that we have factories that build actual products, but also the software that goes on it. And we're working more towards that connected, touchless factories. So a lot of that, data that comes in, we need to understand. And it's not a matter of, is that design right, but how is that feeding into to the vendor? How many weeks out do they need to start planning the shipments? How do we get EDIs from the customer? And what kind of parts need to go on to what products, placement times, things like that. Those are being actually calculated, and on a regular basis. And we're somewhat manual at this point in time because we're getting the data, but not fully integrated into the system. But it's important for them to continuously understand, how these things are interacting, because, it's not an entry into the system to say or book, cost or revenue. It's really understanding when is that activity going to happen? What's that cost related to it? What's that impact to the department, as they go into spend and say, hey, I need X million dollars to develop something, and you just go there. Mm-hmm.
And what would you say are the key factors that you would be gauging when you're looking at whether or not you should be incorporating a new technology?
Well, first off, one of the things I am a little cautious, a little bit, is not be on the, let's say, B2. I have that technology on there, right?
Don't just jump in
It is
because
not
everyone else
necessary.
is.
It's not a social fact that we have to say we're on there. But it's also, you don't want to be too far behind on things, because if you don't, your business will drive you to it, and you don't want to be rushing to something that you're not capable of. But definitely, as Rick said, give the people or your people the ability to look into technology, learn about it, experiment a little bit around it, not really develop something new on their own. My team are great, but they're not engineers. But it is important to give them that capability and that ability to go out and look at technology and learn on it. And maybe a little bit of budget to go with it.
Absolutely, a little budget can't hurt. How is technology for each of you helping you get a leg up on competitors in your industry? Rick, you want to take that first?
Sure. Again, as a technology company, obviously we're constantly trying to leverage it.
That's the water you're swimming in.
For advantage. There's a couple of elements of this, and it really ties into what's been said here is using data smartly and maximizing the ability to do automation, using some of that machine learning. A good example is Mailchimp's sort of famous for having a very large freemium offering. So we have tens of millions of users around the world that use our, in the old school we were email marketing focused, but so for freemium, if you can just picture this, a person can come to our app, open up an account and start sending emails, and if it's freemium, we don't even have their credit card. So it's a perfect opportunity for abuse. And so a lot of folks come into our space and decide they want to compete with us on a freemium offering. What they don't realize is the amount of algorithms you need to be able to shut accounts down even before they start sending. So
Abusive accounts.
Abusive accounts, spam, et cetera, et cetera. We can shut accounts down before they even start sending because we can look at their behavior. We can, we actually have ways of evaluating their actual list that they're about to use. Things like that, took us years to develop. But it's a perfect example of how we can operate with a large freemium model and it doesn't hurt us. Some other folks have tried and it's literally damaged their business and their reputation. You get shut down by all the networks if you're spamming and things like that. So that's a real world example of how we're using technology for an edge.
Sure. Wow. Pietro, what about you?
Well, for me, technology, it's the way to make a better life on board for employees, to release better reliable data for the upper management. And also, when it comes to competitive advantage, obviously, so we try to offer to our customer the opportunity to be prompt compared to the competitor, make sure the technology help us solving the problem within the 24 hours versus the competitors. Try to offer solution immediately because we cannot afford customer to be off with their machine, with their production. So for us, eventually, the technology is the way to reach out our final customer and to solve the problem immediately. On the other end, in financial department, the goal is to have a good quality that every time you need to crunch data, you need to release data, you need to provide, any sort of, I would say, reporting on or financial data. It's user-friendly and the opportunity to, to release data quickly and accurately. That's ultimately what technology is for me, along to the fact that it needs to be also affordable because, as a CFO, we cannot afford to spend a fortune to upgrade to the next level or just to be fancy for the sake of upgrading to the next level, but it has to be within the budget and within the scope of work. That's what technology is for myself.
Right. And Dhiraj, do you agree with that? What would you say?
I think both of you have really important points that you look at, and it's the industries of technology and what keeps you in that industry. It's that license to entry, right? So for us, it's not providing a solution to a problem. In automotive, it's being ahead of that want. When people say, well, every time you go out there and look at a car and say, if only I could do everything I did on my phone in the car, then I wouldn't feel differentiated from holding the phone to driving the car, right? Or autonomous driving, the things that we're looking at. It's still cutting edge. We are in there. So that's the other side of it, where we're not standing back and waiting for something to happen. We're actively and proactively working on it to develop that for future users. But finance has to keep up with it, primarily from the R&D perspective, to understand, what are you going to spend on, why is the company spending that amount? How are we going to get the ROI on it later? And it just doesn't end with calculating the numbers. It's also working with marketing, saying, how are you going to sell it? Sometimes you're just, pushing them to say, if you can't sell it, I'm not making it, right? Or I am going to make it, find a way to sell it, right? Because you have to understand the pulse of the users or the future users, because many of them, it's just like Apple iPhone. They didn't know they wanted it, but once it was out there, they needed it, right? And now you can't do without it. Similarly for cars, it is changing, right? And being on the cutting edge of it, as we work with the Googles, and Apples, it's not in the Fords, so it's not just a car company, but it's also a tech company. We're working to marry all of it together. So keeping on top of that is very important for us.
Yeah, and I think one of the key takeaways here is there's just such a delicate balance that you have to strike as a CFO today between not only the financial angle, but also all of these evolving technologies and balancing, both the balance sheet and keeping up with the times. So thank you all so much for joining me. Please thank our panelists with me. Thanks so much, all of you.